I installed the doorbell camera because raccoons kept treating our trash cans like a midnight buffet. My wife said it would also calm me down, since I wake at every creak like a storm siren. The first few weeks were just raccoons, a cat, and a neighbor who walks like his knees forgot a setting. I let the video clips pile up, unreviewed, until the night the app buzzed at 2:13 in the morning. The phone face lit the bedroom like a small aquarium, blue and cold on my palms. On screen, two boys stood under our porch light, perfectly still, hoods up, rain tracking silver lines down their sleeves. They didn't ring the bell. They looked at the lens as if they had already rung something deeper. I tapped to talk and heard my voice come thin and metallic from the porch speaker. "Can I help you guys?" I asked, whispering without meaning to. My wife, sleeping beside me. The taller one answered in a voice that might have been 15 or 50. "Sir, may we come inside and use your telephone, please? No one says telephone anymore." I felt the word slide along my skin like a cold coin. "We can call for you," I said, keeping it careful, thinking about how many videos start with caution and end with regret. "Please," the shorter boy said, and I heard a faint knocking somewhere that wasn't the door. He was not speaking over the speaker. The knocking was inside my head, like someone tapping the bone behind my ear. Their skin looked too smooth, like faces I had seen only in mall windows and dream glass. I zoomed the video. The lens flared. Then the boys' eyes lost their irises and became deep, paint-flat circles. It could have been glare or compression, heat or rain on the lens. I told myself all the adult words for fear. My thumb hovered over the emergency call icon, and the taller boy tilted his head at the exact speed of my hesitation. "Mr. Hall," he said, and the name buckled my throat like a seatbelt, suddenly locking. I had never met them. I do not post our last name on anything anyone could see from the street. "How do you know me?" I asked, testing the screen, testing reality, trying not to be the man who opens the door anyway. "Sir," he said again, and then spoke a rhyme my grandmother used when I was 5 and afraid of thunder. He said it line by line, in her exact rhythm, every word perfect, every pause like a turned key. My wife stirred and sighed and settled again, unaware of the way my childhood had climbed onto our porch. Something knocked again, the same pattern as my childhood rhyme, as if the syllables had hands. "Please let us in," the shorter boy said, and his voice came back in the speaker, lagged by half a beat, like an echo returning bruised. I looked at the timestamp. It still said 2:13, though the minute should have rolled on by now. I switched to live view. The timer started moving. The boys did not. In the live feed, their eyes regained irises, wet and normal, dark brown, and not a story at all. "Are you in trouble?" I asked, dragging the words across my mouth like a heavy trunk. "We have to come inside," the taller one said, a single emphasis on have that sounded more like must. "Where are your parents?" I asked, because that is a safe question from a library of safe questions. "Sir," he said, "we are not far from home." His smile did not involve the muscles that make human smiles. "Look," I said, "I'll call the police to come help you." "Sir, please do not call them," the shorter one said, and the speaker hissed as if the electronics disliked the sentence. Behind them, rain traced brighter lines. The porch light flickered once. The boys did not blink. "Our house has more doors than it needs. A front and a back and a side door that serves no purpose except to worry me." When the speaker popped, I heard something tapping on the side door, the one we never use. I muted the feed, and the tapping grew stronger, as if the mute removed a layer of glass between it and me. I unmuted, and the tapping went gentle again, polite knuckles on polite paint. I said, "No, you can't come in," and felt both brave and small. The taller boy nodded, as if we had agreed to a reasonable price for something that didn't have a price. "We will wait," he said, and the shorter one smiled with his teeth closed. The feed hiccuped and showed me an empty porch, wet concrete, the light humming quietly in a cone. I scrubbed backward. The boys were there. I scrubbed forward. They were gone between frames, like a breath that refused to fog glass. I put the phone down and clipped the chain across the door that no one strong would respect. From the side door came a final knock, soft as a fingertip on a wrist, testing for pulse. Somewhere along the hall, my daughter's bedroom nightlight clicked and flickered, though it is not designed to click or flicker. I went to her door and listened. I heard the small country of her breathing, steady and sure. At breakfast, she said she had dreamed about the schoolboys waiting in the hallway for the bell to ring. She said they wore the wrong kind of jackets, and their hair made shadows that went the wrong direction. I told her dreams can borrow from anything on a shelf in your head. That afternoon, I watched the clip 20 times. I sent it to a friend in it, asking about compression artifacts. He wrote back that those look like eyes to him, and maybe I should sleep more. That evening, the app buzzed again at 2:13, though it was 9:08 and laundry time. I opened the live view. The porch was empty. The timestamp read 2:13 until the second I lifted the phone to squint. At 10, I went outside with the trash. The porch smelled strange, like rain and old coins. The light hum had a new note under it, a half step lower, a thread you notice only when you catch it on your ring. I told myself, raccoons. I told myself, kids being kids. I told myself the world is what it was yesterday. At 2:13, the app buzzed and woke me, like my name spoken inside my ear. On the screen, the boys stood closer to the door, hoods pushed back, hair neat like school pictures. They did not smile. They did not blink. The air around them was very clear, as if they had brought clarity with them. "We will wait," the taller boy said again, and the shorter one nodded, as if to a teacher. I stared until the timer moved without them, then with them, then not at all for a whole breath. In the morning, footprints the size of mine were pressed into the wet concrete, heel to toe, but facing the door. They were not there at midnight when I checked the porch to calm my heart. My daughter said the boys had moved into the guest room in her dream and were very quiet guests. My wife asked why I kept the chain on during the day like we lived in a movie. I said I would call the company about the timestamps. I said the boys were probably a prank. That night, I set the phone face down so I could sleep without watching the shape of a number. At 2:13, I woke anyway, not too buzzing, but 2 soft steps in the hall and the sure knowledge of 2 boys waiting. I did not open the app. I did not open the door. I lay listening to a rhyme I hadn't heard since thunder was taller than me. The doorbell camera recorded nothing that night except a moth trying the light like a lock. Sometimes the app still hiccups and shows to 13 in the corner when it is not even close to that time. Sometimes the hallway is colder than the rooms it connects, like a bridge held in another climate. If you ever find 2 boys on your porch borrowing your oldest words, do not let them inside. They already are. After Eli died, the backyard stopped being a place and turned into a photograph. The swings hung in the windless air, as if tied to the sky by a deal I could not find. I turned off notifications for everything I could: work, news, family chats that punctured the day like thrown pebbles. I kept notifications on for the cameras because my therapist said, "Control is a ladder, even if it leans on nothing." The first motion alert came while I folded his t-shirts into a bag I could not zip. The lock screen showed the backyard in winter light, flat and cold, with a yellow circle over the sandbox. "Motion detected," the banner said, helpful as a polite cough at a funeral. The clip was 11 seconds of nothing. A leaf moved, or a shadow wished it could be a leaf. I told the app to tag it as wind. The app apologized in a font designed not to upset. That night, I dreamed Eli laughing in the sprinkler. Where water makes jewels on eyelashes, someone will close later. The next afternoon, while I made tea, the app chimed and my heart behaved like it had been called by name. The clip showed the swing moving once, a careful arc designed not to scare anyone. I thought of the rules we made for him: no running with sticks, no climbing higher than the third rung, no pretending the mulch is lava. The swing steadied. The mulch still looked like lava. I made a folder called Eli Motion and put the clip inside as you would place a stone on a grave. The alerts came when I stayed still, with a memory heavy in my hands. They came when I stood at the back door and rehearsed the name I was no longer supposed to say out loud. They came when I whispered to the air that I could be a good mother inside a new shape of life. The clips never showed a person. They showed paths through the grass that did not exist when I stood outside. They showed the yellow shovel tipped against the sandbox lip, then lying flat in the next minute without a hand. One night it rained long and tired, a wave of rain that felt like the sky had a fever. At 2 a.m, the app chimed, and I watched a figure at the sandbox that might have been a child, or might have been the shape rain makes when it gathers. The figure did not move. It waited with patience I recognized. I did not wake my husband. He was sleeping like a man trying to win at sleep, because he could win at nothing else right now. I whispered Eli's name, and in the clip the swing moved once, the exact length he used to push it while thinking. I stepped outside in slippers that swallowed water and walked across grass that did not accept my weight. The air smelled like hose water and the rubber floor of an indoor pool. "Baby, if that is you, show me a sign I can keep," I said, and my breath made a rope I could not hold. The motion alert chimed again and showed me, small and temporary, meeting the figure that was not there in the live feed. The next day, I turned on the sprinkler to see if water might draw the shape again, like the way light summons moths. Mist made a veil between house and fence. Letters appeared in it the way letters appear in the mirror after showers. The letters were not letters. They were the shapes Eli made when he first discovered the joy of pretending his hand was a pen. They were loops that never closed and sticks that never crossed, meaning everything only to the person who made them. I told the air I understood, and my mouth filled with the taste of cold. The alerts continued, sometimes 2 in an hour, sometimes none for days, as if grief had learned the rhythm of tides. On a Tuesday, I set a toy truck at the sandbox edge and asked, "If it's you, move it into the sand." At dinner, my husband asked if I wanted to try the support group again. I nodded like a puppet and looked at my phone under the table, as if it were a tiny window into a kinder world. The truck moved during dessert. It rolled into the sand without tracks behind it, like a thought switching lanes. I showed him the clip and watched his face decide between relief and fear. He said, "Maybe we are not seeing what we think we're seeing." And I agreed, because agreeing is how you stay married to a person who wants you to live. That night, I asked whatever made the clips to please stop if it was not Eli. The swing moved once, hard enough to creak the chain, the exact protest he made when told no. I said, "I am not brave if you pretend to be him." And the porch light flickered like a slow blink. The next alert came with a sound the camera should not capture, a soft shush of small feet moving dry leaves. I watched the clip twice. On the third play, a small shadow peeled from the swing seat and stood beside it. It was neither the height nor the weight of Eli. It was the outline of a child from a paper chain. I had been fed memories. I had been led gently by the hand to this place where familiarity opens any door. I said into the backyard, "Do not come as him. Come as yourself, or do not come at all." No alert came for a week. The yard went still as a paused movie. On the 8th day, the camera caught a taller shape standing by the fence, hands at its sides like a child learning a new prayer. The swing did not move. The shovel stayed where the shovel was put. The figure only stood where people do not stand unless they belong. "Who are you?" I asked, in a voice I did not want to be my voice. The clip showed the grass bending around its feet, as if weight had graduated there. "My husband said he would call a technician. He said we should update firmware and face forward." I set a second camera at a different angle, like a second opinion. The next alert showed nothing on one camera and a long human shadow on the other, as if truth had picked a side. I brought the toy truck back inside and packed the swings with plastic wrap like a winter ritual. That night, the figure stood near the porch and looked at the nothing a lens calls a lens. I whispered, "I cannot feed this," and the figure tilted its head the way hunger tilts when you deny it. I turned off all alerts and slept with the phone in the kitchen where I would not hear its small bell. In the morning, the mulch had been raked into a single long line that spelled nothing in any language we had invented. I swept it back, and my husband drank coffee over the sink, as if standing might help. "Maybe we should move," he said. And I said, "Maybe we already did." Now I turn the cameras on only when the weather runs too hard for fences. When the app pings, it is mostly wind, sometimes a cat, sometimes a neighbor who does not know where their feet should go. Sometimes the alert shows the figure by the sandbox in the shape it chose, taller, patient, untaught by my grief. Sometimes it does not come at all, and the swing keeps still like a promise I finally learned not to ask for. When the first package appeared, I assumed porch pirates had learned a new trick. The box sat neat on the mat, like a thought someone wanted me to think. The label said, "Hold for delivery," in block letters that seemed to vibrate if I stared. There was no return address. The barcode was a tidy rectangle of black that my phone refused to see. The camera showed a courier in a gray uniform with a cap from another decade. He climbed the steps without hurry and set the box down with both hands like a ritual. When I opened the door, the package was warm, the cardboard holding the memory of someone's palms. I took it inside and considered the list of wrong addresses I had received this year like postcards from a stranger's life. Inside was paper the color of long hallways, and a single slip that said recipient must be absent to complete delivery. I laughed at it, the nervous laugh of a man who bills by the hour and hates being unproductive. I set the box on a chair. When I turned back with a knife, the chair was empty. The camera did not show anyone entering or leaving. The door did not open. The box simply ceased being here. The next morning, a second package sat where the first had, and the label had my name in a font my bank uses. The slip inside said, "Delivery attempted. No absence detected. Please vacate." I told myself a neighbor was playing a joke. I told myself the world was still held together by tape and gravity. That night, the camera caught the courier again. Head down, cap brim hiding eyes that did not shine like eyes. He knocked once, a knock that sounded more like a stamp. I watched the feed on the couch without standing. The courier waited, as if waiting were his paying work. He turned to leave and paused, as if listening to a far sorting machine. The label on the box read "Hold for delivery," and under it, my street number repeated like a chant. I went to the door and opened it onto a cool, honest night, with a moth doing its best to be an angel. The box waited. The courier had vanished between frames, the way professionals do when trim is the job. I brought the box inside. The slip this time said, "Third attempt, recipient present, action required." The word "required" made me think of tax forms and medical charts, and the last time a nurse called my full name without looking up. I wrote a note and taped it to the door. It said, "Please deliver to the correct address. Do not leave packages here." The next day, my note came back inside the box, folded with care, a small bruise of tape on its corner. I decided to catch him in the act, because calling anyone would make this real, and I wasn't ready for real. At 1:10 in the morning, a white van without logos stopped under the streetlight that once kept me safe and now made me visible. The courier stepped out, shoulders square, moving like the root had been carved into him. Up close, the uniform was almost right and almost not. The stitching wandered. The buttons were printed on heki, carried the empty shape of a clipboard, and traced a pen over air where paper should have been. I opened the door before he could knock, his head tilted at the speed of a receipt curling in heat. "You can't leave that here," I said, and heard how polite I sounded, how very ready to be reasonable. He handed me a pen that had no weight. It left no mark on my fingers, yet my hand remembered holding it. "Sign for non-delivery," he said, his voice like paper sliding against paper. "What is this for?" I asked, which is a small question that means, "Please tell me how to survive this." "Hold for delivery," he said, and the words fogged the space between us, as if they were warmer than the air. "What do you want me to do?" I asked, and the pen touched my palm like a moth landing where light has let it. "Vacate," he said, and his cap brim made a horizon where no sun would rise. I stepped back so the door stood between us, half open, half closed, as if the house itself could not decide on me. "My lease is not up," I said, almost laughing. "No lease on absence," he said, and for a second his face was a label, smooth and blank, all address and no human. Something thumped in the van, as if a small conveyor belt had swallowed a shoe. He lifted the box and held it out. The label rippled and showed my name handwritten. "Take it," he said, and the idea of refusing felt like telling rain not to fall. I reached, and the box was not heavy and not light. It was the weight of being watched. Inside, the slip said recipient confirmed, scheduled for removal when premises are empty. I set the box in the hall, and it made the hall feel less like a path and more like a place someone leaves. That week, neighbors began to mention packages that were almost theirs, but not quite. A woman across the street said a box with her maiden name appeared and blew away when she breathed on it. A man 2 doors down said a courier waited until he drove off, then placed a package shaped like the space under a bed. We stood at the curb like a neighborhood meeting without coffee, pretending we were not measuring our lives in tape and labels. The courier's van stopped on our street every night at no hour at all. The packages came when houses were empty by design or by accident. The boxes left as silently as they came, as if they were only real when we failed to witness them. I began leaving the house for long walks at strange hours to see if he would deliver to everyone who obeyed the slip. He delivered to me every time I circled the block far enough to make the house forget my footsteps. Each time, a new slip. Each time, the language less like mail and more like orders given to weather. I set the boxes in the spare room and closed the door as if sound could not pass paint. The room filled with something that made the air hard to pull into lungs. When friends came over, they paused at the hallway, as if they had lost their names for what we were doing. On a Thursday, the slip read final notice. Recipient will be collected during absence. I laughed alone in the kitchen, and the laugh sounded like a coin dropped in a jar that would never be full. That night, I sat in the dark living room and watched the feed without blinking. The courier arrived, cap brim cutting the streetlight into obedient pieces. He stepped onto the porch and looked through the door at the place where I used to imagine a future. He did not knock. When he turned, I stepped onto the porch with him and felt the air on my teeth. "I am here," I said, which is a sentence people do not say unless they fear being considered otherwise. He looked at me, and the part of his face that would be eyes shone with the flatness of a printed star. "You are already leaving," he said, and the van engine idled like a low chant. "Where are you taking the packages?" I asked, and the question tasted like dust. "Not where, when," he said, and the word pressed against me like a door that opens the wrong way. He handed me the pen. My hand rose because hands have old loyalties. I did not sign. I held the pen until it forgot it had ever been a pen and became air again. The courier nodded as if I had signed anyway and returned to the van. He drove off without sound, as if rubber had renounced friction for the night. The boxes were gone in the morning. The spare room smelled like paper in a rainstorm. My name feels lighter now, as if the ink used on it ran and would not settle back. Sometimes I hear a van down the street, engine low, waiting for a porch to be empty enough. Sometimes I stand in my own doorway and test how absent a person can be while still taking up space. If you see a package that needs no sender and knows your name, do not bring it inside. It already knows the way.